Well, to get a bit more analysis now, we can speak to Behnam Ben Taleblu, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. Thank you for coming on the programme.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We're going to get into some of the details in just a moment. First, though, could I just get your headline thoughts on where the country stands right now?
The country is free of the Assad regime, a murderous regime which has really ruled from Damascus for over half a century now. But most unfortunately, even as was seen in some of the segments in the videos that you just showed there, this is yet another phase, a transitional phase of the Syrian civil war, which has really engulfed that country now for more than a decade.
And how did we get here? I want to do two things here, if we can. One, look at what happens now and next. But just before we do, I want to just look at some of the roles of the countries nearby in what has happened. Can we start with Turkey and what exactly has happened to lead us to where we are?
Absolutely. You know, in Turkey, where President Erdogan is, it's a major NATO country, but it's also a country that's provided laissez-passer to Sunni Islamist fighters and even some al-Qaeda-linked fighters in the past. Turkey backs the SNA, the Syrian National Army, which is currently fighting with the majority, but not exclusively Turkish, with not exclusively Kurdish SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is backed by the U.S. Turkey's initial goal with its interventions into Syria was to get rid of the Assad regime, but over time that morphed into trying to prevent Kurdish-led cantons from growing and connecting and creating a Kurdish autonomous zones on Turkey's southern border. So Turkey plays a significant military and political role, and Turkey, if we remember 4 years ago, it helped broker that stalemate or deconfliction or ceasefire agreement in the northwest, and it was Turkey's footsie diplomacy with the Assad regime that failed that likely ended up being one of the things that paved the way for the rise in operations by HTS and other groups against Damascus.
Okay, so a hugely significant contributing factor. Let's look at the other country here, Iran. What do you make of their role here?
Well, Iran and the Assad regime go back many, many years. The Islamic Republic of Iran has had really only one state partner throughout its 45-year existence in the Middle East, and that's been the Assad family in Damascus and Syria. Bashar al-Assad's father, Hafez, stood with Shiite Persian Iran against most of the Sunni Arab world during the 8-year Iran-Iraq war. Iran, in exchange, bailed out his son, Bashar al-Assad, over the past 13 years, but that government, as you just saw, crumbled within less than 2 weeks with the newest HTS-led offensive. Lest we forget, however, Syria also occupies a key role in Iran's axis of resistance. This is the constellation of proxy and partner forces that the regime has that it marshals against Israel, Arab states, as well as against U.S. positions. And Iranian officials have previously referred to Syria as the long pole in this tent. So the land bridge that Iran has benefited from, allowing it to be an Eastern Mediterranean power and arm its chief proxy, Hezbollah in Lebanon, has now been cut with this fall in Damascus.
Okay, so you've outlined there really clearly some of the international undercurrents that have swept us to this position where we are now. Let's bring it right up to date then to right now. What have you heard about the political situation that gives you any nudge about how you think this could play out politically?
Well, politically, it's always interesting when the guns stop firing and the people start speaking and the pens start writing. The question is, once conflicts emerge, not just between HTS and other forces, but also the millions and millions of Syrians who had been protesting, who are neither defined by mosque or military, who actually wanted secular democratic government and had really touched off this movement more than a decade ago. The real question right now is, how will their voices be heard when you look at the armed opposition? Will there be space for them? Some room for cautious optimism is the fact that some language from the transitional council, the transitional government, talked about territorial integrity. Many of the neighboring countries, be it Turkey, Iran, or others, had worried about a balkanization or a fracturing of Syria. But in the short term right now, we're looking at how can you get these multiple voices to actually confirm and live up to that which they've said or that which they've written on paper before.
Yeah, but isn't the reality on the ground will be whichever groups have the most weapons, the most resources, the most power, as of now and in the days ahead, actually get to shape more of a future?
That is the case with most revolutions, yes. There's also the case of, which of these backers benefit from some degree of foreign intervention or foreign support. For example, HTS is still sanctioned by the U.S. There still is a bounty or a warrant on the head of that group, Mr. Jolani. Does have a several $1 million bounty on his head by the U.S., but at the same time, the U.S. hasn't targeted him. If you looked at the history of U.S. targeted airstrikes with drones and whatnot against other al-Qaeda and terror-linked forces. So who knows exactly what the kaleidoscope of Syrian domestic armed groups will look like when talking about foreign intervention or foreign support in the short term.
Behnam Ben Taleblu, thank you very much for coming on the program. Thank you.
Thank you.